The alchemists left one warning for the person who refuses to burn. It was never about gold. Carl Jung bends over their books for years and finds what no chemist was looking for. Every fire on those pages is a fire inside a person. What it burns toward, Jung calls individuation, and the alchemists were drawing it without knowing. Long before psychology existed, an alchemist named Zosimos records a vision. A priest inside a temple is cut apart, boiled, burned, and walks out changed. Jung reads it as a true map of what a psyche goes through to become itself. You have stood at the edge of a fire like that, a grief, an ending you saw coming. You turned the flame down, and the thing you would not feel got buried alive. There is something in you that never finished. Refuse the fire and it does not go out. It turns inward and smolders for years, or you finally learn what the alchemists were trying to teach. This is where the warning turns. The fire you refuse does not disappear. It goes underground, burning under other names, and you keep living the life you would not let it change. Start with what these people actually were, because the cartoon in your head is wrong. The alchemists were not fools chasing a get-rich trick. For centuries, some of the most careful minds in Europe spent their lives sealing metals in glass, writing what they saw in a coded language of kings and black suns and dying birds. They were not stupid. So what were they doing? Jung asked that question for decades, and his answer changes how we read all of it. He notices that the alchemists keep describing things that never happened to metal. Their materials suffer. Their materials die and are reborn, long for union, cry out inside the glass. No chemical does that. Jung sees that these men were staring so hard into their flasks that their own unconscious poured out onto what they saw, and without knowing it, they were drawing a precise map of the human soul in change. What follows is the map they left, what the fire was really for, why you keep pulling your hand back from it, what that refusal quietly costs, and the part few ever reach, how they said to stay in the heat without breaking. That last part is the only one that changes anything. The gold at the end was never the point. All along it stood for a finished self. The whole long process, the opus, was a picture of what it actually takes to become a whole person, drawn by people who had no psychology yet, so they used fire and metal to say it. And it begins with the least glamorous thing in the room, the prima materia, the first matter. The alchemists were oddly specific about it. The substance you have to start with is base, common, worthless, the thing everyone walks past, thrown in the street, found in the filth. Sit with how strange that is. The grandest change a human can undergo does not start with your best material. It starts with your worst, the part of you that is unfinished and a little shameful, the grief you never processed, the anger you file away and call maturity, the version of you that is still, underneath everything, lead, that heavy, dull, unmoved thing you have carried for years and called stability. You already know where your lead is. You do not have to go looking. It is the exact memory you root around. It is the conversation you have rehearsed 100 times and never had. It is the one room in the house of your life with the door kept shut. Do not rush to manage it away with better habits. In the alchemist's scheme, it is the single most valuable thing you own, because it is the only part of you dense enough to change. The competent surface everyone praises cannot become anything. It is already plated, already finished, already lead pretending to be gold. Only the raw, heavy, unfinished matter has somewhere left to go. Think of a man of 58 who understood this the wrong way round. A few years ago, the thing he built came apart. A marriage in his case. He did not come apart with it. Within days, he was functional, organized, telling everyone he was fine, forwarding his mail and folding the old life into labeled boxes with an efficiency that impressed people. One box he taped shut and put on the top shelf of a closet and never opened. He never let anything blacken. He took himself off the fire the moment the heat rose. He is the one who handled it too well, and we keep coming back to him, because his lead is still sealed on that shelf. That lead is the raw material of the whole work. Nothing happens without it. This is the first hard truth the alchemists built their science on. Lead is not polished into gold, or affirmed into gold, or protected into gold. Fire is the only thing that changes it, and only by letting it fall apart. That is the flame you have circled your whole life. Not hardship in general, a specific fire, the conscious kind, the kind you undergo on purpose because the other way is worse. The alchemists had a plain word for what the fire does. It reduces. It takes the thing apart so it can come back as something that was not possible before. You know this fire by how you avoid it. There is a heat you have managed the edges of for years, turning it down whenever it climbed, keeping it at a careful simmer so it never actually cooked anything. And the alchemists warned hardest about one thing. A refused fire does not go out. It goes somewhere else in you, and it keeps burning. Therefore, to see why you keep reaching for that flame and turning it off, you have to watch what happens inside the fire first. Because the first thing the material does in the heat is not shine, it goes completely black. The alchemists called this first stage the nigredo, the blackening. It is the part every text agrees you cannot skip, and the part every text writes about in the language of death. The material rots. It turns black and comes apart. To anyone watching, the whole thing looks like it is being destroyed. That has a shape in a life. The nigredo is the dark stretch you would do anything to avoid. It is the depression that arrives when a story you live by stops being true. It is the week after the marriage ends when you finally stop being busy. It is the grief that will not resolve into a lesson. The season where the person you were is coming apart and the person you will be does not exist yet. This darkness has no candle waiting at the end of it. It feels like dying, because something is in fact dying. Jung takes the alchemist seriously right here, where it would be easy to call this morbid superstition. He watches it in himself and in his patients. He says it plainly and without comfort. Real change in a person is always paid for in pain. The pain is the mechanism of the whole change. The blackening does the transforming. It is the change itself, arriving at the stage where it looks most like ruin. So picture the vessel again, with your own material inside it, finally going dark, and picture what you have done every single time at exactly this moment. You reach in and take it off the fire. The second the blackening starts, the moment the grief goes from sad to bottomless, the instant the depression stops feeling survivable, something in you reaches up and lifts the vessel off the heat. And it works. The pain stops climbing and the material cools. You survive the night. From the outside, it can even look like strength. Do not despise yourself for this. The reaching hand is the sanest instinct you have. The fire genuinely hurts. The blackening genuinely looks like death. No living thing is built to sit still and let itself come apart. Every animal pulls back from a flame. The alchemists knew this. They wrote constantly about the temptation to open the vessel early, to check the work and in checking it ruin it. They knew because they had done it, and watched their material fall back to gray. The hand moves the moment the pain crosses from feeling meaningful to feeling endless. While grief still has a shape, while you can see the far side of it, you can bear it. When it goes shapeless, when it stops promising to end, the hand goes up on its own. That is the edge you have lived at for years, close enough to the fire to feel the heat and call yourself deep, never in it long enough to let anything actually char. And the cooling feels like mercy. That is the trap. Every time you lift the vessel off the flame, relief floods through you, because the unbearable thing stopped. Relief is a strong teacher. It trains you again and again to link rescue with safety and the fire with danger, until reaching for the lid stops feeling like a choice at all. By now, it is a reflex. You have gotten so good at surviving the blackening that you have never once completed it. The man of 58 is a master of this reach. When his marriage ended, he did not sit in the dark. He organized the dark. Every time the grief rose towards something bottomless, he found a task, a plan, a box to label, and the heat came back down to a manageable warmth. Everyone told him how well he was doing. He believed them. And the tape box went up on the shelf with the fire inside it turned all the way down. Every time you take the vessel off the heat, the fire you escape does not vanish. It waits. The vessel now holds the same gray lead you started with, intact and safe, exactly as unfinished as before. You lost nothing in the fire because you let it take nothing, and you gained nothing either. But this is where the alchemists stopped reassuring you, because they were honest and not kind. Taking the material off the fire does not only pause the work, therefore they had to tell you what it does to the person who keeps doing it, and it is the thing you have felt for years without a name. This is what the title promised. What happens if you refuse to burn is not dramatic. That is the cruelty of it. Nothing explodes and no lightning finds you. What happens is that you stay led, and you keep living the life that lead can live, which is a smaller and smaller version of the one you were meant for. Unfinished material does not hold whatever partial change it went through. It reverts. Take it off the fire and it settles back to base metal every time, no matter how often you restart. So the first cost is repetition. The same relationship with a new face, the same argument in a new job, the same quiet disappointment arriving on schedule every few years, and you standing over it, asking why this keeps finding you. It keeps finding you because you keep interrupting the one process that could change it. You solved the surface and refused the depth, so the depth stayed exactly as it was and simply grew a new surface. The man of 58 swore the next few years would be different, and on the surface they were. New apartment, new routines, a calendar that finally made sense. But the same silence he never once examined settled over the new life on schedule, like something he had packed and carried from the old life into the new. Nothing supernatural happened. The unburned material simply travels. You carry the sealed vessel from house to house and person to person, and everywhere you set it down, the same gray thing inside it shapes the same gray outcome, because you never let it become anything else. Jung has a hard phrase for this. What is not made conscious does not simply go away. It returns to us from the outside as fate. Read that slowly because it is the engine of your whole repeating life. The grief you took off the fire did not leave. The anger you never let blacken did not dissolve. It went underground with its full charge and began arranging your circumstances from below. So the thing you would not face inside kept happening to you outside over and over until it looked like bad luck or a bad world instead of one unfinished vessel on a cold shelf. This is the second cost, and it is heavier than the first, the unlived life. There is a version of you that never got to exist, because it lived on the far side of a fire you would not walk through. The alchemists would say the gold in you is still locked inside the lead, whole and waiting, and every time you rescue the material early, you seal that gold in for another few years. You are not empty. That is the part people misread. You are full of a life that never got lived, held down under a lid you keep your hand on. And there is a quieter cost, the one nobody warns you about. You get good at it. The person who refuses the fire long enough does not become obviously broken. They become competent, managed, a little gray. They cope beautifully and handle things. They are the one everyone calls strong, because they never come apart, and no one, including them, can see that the strength and the grayness are the same thing. The unburned life photographs well. It just does not feel like anything from the inside. You can measure it by how little you feel, not sharp pain. You handled that. Just a low, even flatness, The volume on your whole life turned down 2 notches. That flatness can pass for peace for years. It is the temperature of lead. But if you think refusing the fire at least keeps you safe from the burning, the alchemists have one more thing to tell you, and it is the most disturbing turn in the whole opus. Safe is the one thing you have never been. So the reveal we have been walking toward lands now. When you take the vessel off the flame, you are not choosing between fire and no fire. You never had that choice. The material gets worked either way. All you are choosing is which fire does the working. The contained, conscious kind that transforms, or the slow, hidden kind that only consumes. Because the heat does not vanish when you refuse it. The grief still has to go somewhere. The anger still carries its full charge. With the vessel off the flame and the lid held shut, all that undischarged heat turns inward and begins to smolder. No light, no transformation, just a low, constant burn under the surface of a life that looks handled, eating the very material the fire would have transmuted, except now it eats it for nothing. You know this smolder. It is the 3 a.m. restlessness in a life that looks fine on paper. It is the irritation always a little too large for its cause. It is the fatigue sleep does not touch, the flatness from a moment ago turned faintly hot, the sense of something running in the background you cannot find and cannot switch off. Jung sees exactly what the alchemists drew. The dying down, the blackening, was going to happen to your material one way or another. Undergo it consciously in the vessel, and it transforms you. Refuse it, and you undergo it anyway, slowly, from underneath, as depression and symptom and the strange grief of a life you cannot feel. If that landed somewhere real, put it in the comments, just as it is. I handled it too well to ever feel it. Saying it once puts it back on the heat. This is the whole warning the alchemists left, and this is the part I will not soften. What wounds you is the refusing. The fire itself was only ever the cure you kept declining. Sitting in a sealed vessel while your false material blackens is a clean pain. It ends, and it makes something. Holding the lid down for 30 years while it smolders is a dirty pain. It does not end, and it makes nothing. You have been running from the clean fire straight into the arms of the dirty one and calling it self-protection. That reorganizes the whole story. Every time you were proud of how well you handled a loss, how fast you bounced back, how you did not let it break you, you were describing the moment you took the vessel off the flame and lit the slow burn instead. The strength you are proudest of may be the exact mechanism of the smolder. It is also the most hopeful thing here, and I will show you why in a moment. The smolder has a logic, and the logic explains the years. Undischarged heat has to keep moving, so it finds outlets just large enough to release a little pressure and never large enough to complete anything. A restlessness that makes you rearrange your whole life every few years without ever touching the thing that actually needs to move. Each of these vents the fire a little, so the vessel never quite explodes and never quite transforms. You get a life of small releases and no completion. And it costs the people around him. The man of 58 did not stay sad. He stayed unreachable. His children learned that their father was present and somehow not there, warm in the room and cold underneath, and none of them could have said why. The heat he would not undergo did not stay private. It leaked. It came out sideways as the coolness a family cannot name, as the parent who handles everything and connects with nothing. The material he would not let blacken in himself became the air the people closest to him had to breathe. One sealed vessel on a shelf, and everyone in the house learns to live around the heat coming off it. So the warning turns now, and what it turns into is a door. If the fire is going to burn either way, you were never avoiding it at all. All you ever chose was its form, and that means the thing you have feared your whole life. The clean fire, the conscious blackening, is the way out of the danger you are already standing in. The alchemists did not write their warning to frighten you off the flame. They wrote it to get you back onto it on purpose before the slow burn takes the whole span of your life. But the alchemists did not only diagnose the refusal, therefore they left instructions for how to actually burn, and it is nothing like what the word makes you picture. This is where the alchemists get practical, and where anyone expecting a triumphant blaze is disappointed. Their instruction for how to burn is quiet, technical, almost boring. Seal the vessel and keep the heat steady. Do not open the lid. Stay near the work and let it cook without interfering. That is the whole secret of transformation. It sounds like nothing. It is the hardest thing a human being can do. The sealed vessel had a name they treated as sacred, the vas hermeticum, the closed container. They insisted the whole opus fails without it. Break the seal, let the contents vent, and the material never reaches the temperature where it changes. Everything depends on keeping what is inside, under heat, until it has no choice left but to turn. They were just as strict about the kind of fire, not a violent blaze. The alchemists warned again and again against the fierce fire that cracks the glass and burns the whole work to useless ash. They prized a gentle, steady, patient heat, closer to the warmth of a body than the roar of a furnace. That correction matters because it answers the very thing you are most afraid of. Staying in the fire does not mean drowning in the worst of it all at once. The heat that actually changes you is bearable by design, low and long. What it asks is that you stay warm in the dark far longer than feels safe. Nobody is asking you to burn alive. Translate that out of the workshop. Sealing the vessel means staying with a feeling long enough for it to move through its stages, instead of venting it the second it climbs. When the grief goes shapeless, you do not reach for the lid. When the anger rises, you do not fire it off at the nearest person, and you do not swallow it flat either, because both of those break the seal. You hold it. You stay in the room with your own blackening, awake, not managing it and not performing it, letting it be as hot and as dark as it needs to be inside a container strong enough to hold it. This is why the alchemists insisted the work cannot be rushed and cannot be forced open. It can only be contained and endured. The alchemists wrote it as a rhythm, 2 words they repeated like a heartbeat. Solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine. You let the old form dissolve all the way to black, and only from that true dissolution does a new form set. You cannot recombine what you would not first let fall apart. Every time you rescued the material early, you skipped the dissolving, so there was never anything real to recombine, only the same lead hardening again into the same shape. This is nothing like the fantasy of just feeling your feelings. It is not a wallow, and it is not a breakdown you post about. The vessel is sealed, which means the burning is contained and private and disciplined. You are not spilling the fire everywhere. You are not making your own blackening everyone else's emergency. You hold it inside a container you built strong enough on purpose, so the change happens in you and not on the people around you. That containment is the whole skill. Same fire, but one vessel is sealed and one is shattered. And the container is not something you already have. You build it. You build it out of ordinary, unglamorous supports that let a person stay in heat without breaking. A steady practice of turning toward the feeling instead of away, which is close to what Jung means by staying with an image and letting it speak. 1 or 2 people who can witness the burning without trying to lift you off the flame, which is rarer and worth more than 100 who only comfort you. A life ordered enough on the outside that you can afford to come apart on the inside for a while. None of it is dramatic. All of it is the vessel. For the man of 58, the vessel would be almost embarrassingly small. Not a retreat, not a grand reckoning, just an ordinary evening with the door shut and nobody to perform for, and the willingness to take one tape box down from a shelf and not organize what is inside it. And there is a mercy hidden in the method. The blackening, undergone fully, does end. That is the thing the reaching hand never let you learn. Because you always took the material off the fire mid-descent. You came to believe the darkness had no bottom, that if you ever truly let go, you would fall forever. The alchemists tell you the opposite. Sealed and endured, the Negredo completes. The material that goes all the way black is the only material that ever begins, on its own, to turn. But turn into what? Because if you are bracing for the fire to hand you the gold you were promised, the last thing the alchemists have to say will surprise you. It is quieter and better than gold. The alchemists were careful about one last thing, and it guards you from the whole affirmation lie. The gold at the end of the work, they said, is not common gold, not a prize you spend, not a higher status, not a shinier copy of the self you brought in. The finished stone was their symbol for something plainer and far more valuable. A person who has become genuinely themselves, whole rather than improved, real rather than raised up. That spares you something. You do not owe the fire a transformation into someone remarkable, and that is the quiet fear that kept your hand on the lid for years. The suspicion that if you ever truly burned, you might find there was no gold in there at all. The alchemists answer that fear directly. The stone is made from the base material. The gold was in the lead all along, waiting to be seen all the way through. Whatever is most unfinished in you is the exact and only place the wholeness comes from. In the fire you are reduced, in the end, to who you already are. That was all the gold ever was. So do not expect the fire to make you special. It will not. It does something plainer and better. It makes you actual. The man who finally opens the box does not become impressive. He becomes present. The volume comes back on. The flatness that passed for peace turns back into feeling, and some of that feeling is old grief he owes and now has to pay in full. But he is inside his life now. He is no longer watching it from behind glass. That is what completes on the far side of a fire you stop refusing. Not gold you can show anyone, just the specific, unrepeatable person who was inside the lead the whole time, waiting for you to stop rescuing them from the one heat that could set them free. So once you have let one thing truly burn, you understand why the alchemists spent their lives at the flame and why they pitied the ones who never lit it. The alchemists have been trying to reach you for centuries in a code we only lately learned to read. Their message was never about metal, and it never promised that suffering makes you great. What they left was a warning and a set of instructions, and they are the same thing. The fire is coming for your material either way. The only question they ever asked is whether you undergo it consciously, sealed in a vessel that can hold you, or spend your life holding the lid down while it burns you slowly from underneath. You know the thing you took off the flame, the grief you got efficient about, the truth you filed under maturity, the blackening you have interrupted so many times it feels like the darkness has no bottom. It has a bottom. Sealed and endured, it ends, and only then does anything in you begin to turn. So the one thing to do is small. Find the fire you have kept off the flame and name it. Not the whole burning tonight, just the seal. Just admitting there is something in there you stopped cooking years ago, because the heat got real. You can name it right here. Tell me the one fire you have kept off the flame the longest, in as few words as you can stand. Use these if they fit. I am ready to let it blacken. Saying it out loud is the first time it goes back on the heat. The alchemists swore the material that goes all the way black is the only material that ever shines. Yours is still in there. It is not too late to light it.
Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com.